Who's the greatest? Let's go through a whole bunch of stuff. Greatest football player.
Jim Thorpe. See, now because we tried to record earlier and we're not successful. I've had a time to think about this. Actually, I don't know who Jim Thorpe is. So you tell me, who's the greatest football player?
Oh, okay. So first of all, like props to Jim Thorpe because this dude, I think he like smoked a bunch of cigarettes all the time and just drank. And then he was just like a better athlete than everybody who ever was an Olympian. I think a biography of Jim Thorpe is well worth reading. First Native American to win a gold medal for the United States in the Olympics. So this guy has quite the story. Now, my my second question was going to be the greatest internet service provider. And
it's not Verizon, I'll tell you what.
Now, so this is all coming out because I read this book called Football by Chuck Klosterman, which just came out this year. I recommend it. It's fun. I've never heard of this guy. And then we both like, who's the productivity guy?
Cal Newport?
Yeah, Cal Newport. So I was listening to Cal Newport's podcast. By the way, great podcast. You ever listen to it?
Oh, no, I'd like to, though. Man, that sounds excellent.
Yeah, it comes out on Mondays. So what you should do is listen to Cal Newport on Mondays and the CloudCast on Tuesdays. But he was recommending this book, Football, by Chuck Klosterman. And so I checked it out from the library. I was very pleased. There was 2 books in the system at Great River, and I requested it, and it got sent there. And by the way, the library is the best thing that the government has ever done.
We love the library. We are big pro-library people.
That is the greatest thing about the government. And so anyways, I'm reading it, and he's got just a bunch of essays on football. It's fun. I like football. This is kind of a deep dive into my boyhood a little bit, but he's got an essay about the goat. I think he calls it goat herding. Was the name of the chapter. So that was clever. And he's trying to decide who the greatest football player of all time is, and he decides on this guy, Jim Thorpe, and he's got a bunch of criteria, and part of it is like originality. It's like, how do you define greatness, where you're looking at like the archetype, and I can appreciate that. But my problem with the answer is nobody knows who Jim Thorpe is.
Yeah, it doesn't. So greatness. Yeah, because we were talking about this earlier, right? Dimensions of greatness, and I suppose it's possible to be the greatest, but and be unknown. But what good did it really do you in football if nobody knows you?
Yeah, doesn't fame have to be built into the equation? So we talked about the different metrics you could use for greatness, and it would depend on what you're defining as great. But with football, it would have to be like pure talent, achievement. So did you win? And then, I think fame has there's something to be said. Like Joe Namath, he, by a talent standpoint, my understanding, not that great of a quarterback. But that guy is famous. That guy is cool.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And maybe fame is too shallow of a word. Maybe there's a better word like acknowledgement, public recognition. I'm thinking about how Josh Kerr yesterday or the day before beat the mile world record, which had been in place since 1999. And that makes him the greatest because we all saw it happen. Now, there's doubtlessly somebody out there who can run it faster. Given the world population, there's probably somebody who can run it faster, but it doesn't matter because we didn't see it,
Yeah, exactly. Like you could beat Usain Bolt in a foot race, but if you don't actually beat him in a foot race,
exactly,
never happened. Mm-hmm. So the correct answer, by the way, greatest football player is Tom Brady.
It's got to be. I mean, you can't argue with rings on the finger. You can't.
It's too obvious, the longevity. There's been lots of articles written about this. If you split his career up into 3 different careers, each third of his career warrants a Hall of Fame induction.
Now, here's a question for you to consider related to greatness here. We were talking yesterday, we watched the World Cup final soccer match, Spain and Argentina. And my son Nathaniel said, I think that soccer is boring. That's what he said. They're just kicking the ball around. And then he made a slight at soccer players regarding their intelligence. And he doesn't know anything. So don't take it personally, soccer players. But he made the assertion that he thinks that baseball is probably the sport that requires the greatest intelligence, which of course he would say because he is a baseball player. But that prompted me to go do a little search, ask ChatGPT, which sports require the greatest intelligence. Which one do you think tops the list? You have to think outside the box a little bit here.
Yeah, so then it would definitely depend on your definition of a sport.
Yeah. So like let's say publicly televised athletic and sporting endeavors. I'm not trying not to give it away, but like things that people generally watch on TV.
Chess.
Yeah. Okay. So that would be top of the list if you call it a sport, but it's not. So we're not going to call that a sport.
When you say publicly televised, are we talking ESPN 8, the Ocho?
Yes. Yes, we are. No. Let's say the kind of sport about which a movie might be made because it's significant, those kinds of sports. So, I mean, the chess would be, but chess involves no athleticism, so that doesn't count.
That's a game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I want to answer the question in two different ways. As in, I want to keep it to like the mainstream sports.
Yeah.
Because I think like, so football, it's so position dependent. If you're playing defensive line, there's not a lot of intellect required there. It's like, you go get that guy. But if you're playing quarterback, that is the toughest position to play in all of sports. So absolutely. I think that would be the one. But now you really got me thinking. This is fun.
So
I'm not.
So quarterback in American football would be number two. Number one would be Formula One. Formula One.
For the driver or for the team?
For the driver. And it would be primarily, the argument would be primarily because of the quick thinking, quick decision. Have you ever seen these guys demonstrate their reflexes? It's pretty impressive. So,
yeah. So I would say even on a team perspective, though, those are the world's smartest engineers.
For sure. Yeah.
Because the rules change.
So ChatGPT is routinely making things up, but here's what it says. So take it all with a whole pint of salt. Formula One, American football, especially quarterbacks, linebackers, and safeties. Ice hockey is number 3, which that's, maybe you start out intelligent and then you get hit a bunch of times. Soccer, it would be number 4. And I believe that because the strategy in soccer is continually, it's like under continual shifting and the plays are long, right?
And you've got to have 90 minutes of focus. If you stop focusing for one instant, what happens is Spain scores on you in 16 seconds in extra time.
That's exactly what happened. I was realizing that. I didn't realize that even 5 substitutions in the course of the game is more than historically were allowed in the course of a game.
Used to be 3.
Yeah,
only 3. That's intense. And so and then you've got so many things going on in the game. Fernandez, the guy who got sent off during the final. What a selfish thing to do. So he gets the first yellow by just blatantly disrespecting the referee. And then, dude, the second yellow, you've got to know the situation.
So maybe that is unintelligence, or like you might say that rash behavior is the sign of the fool, and that's why you got kicked out of the game, because you're not right.
Now, this is what's really fun to contemplate. So in baseball, managers will often intentionally get thrown out of a game to rile up their players.
I saw a video clip of a new manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates having it out with the umpire, and the umpire's like, "You're going to have to go harder. Otherwise, I don't have it. I can't. You need to go harder." And then the guy lights him up, and then he's like, "Okay, all right, now you can." It's so good.
That's awesome, because they both recognize it's just a total show.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Do you ever? I got to look up this guy's name. He's a minor league manager who's just legendary for throwing bats on the field, and that sells tickets.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we continue with our greatest?
Yep.
Okay. So, what's the greatest number?
24.
There you go. There you have it. Recurring motif. I would have said 7, but whatever. Greatest color.
This is a risky question to answer. Burnt orange.
And our audience in Austin, Texas has just gone wild. Uh, why?
Yeah, you're just asking me my favorites right now. That's
if you want to make a case for red,
actually
it's dominant.
So when I was a child, when I was a child, I answered that question white, and I actually had a rationale for it. It was not a matter of preference, but I said white is the best, my favorite color, because it is the combination of all of the other colors. So by definition, it is the greatest.
No, yeah, according to light, but if it's on a page, then it'd be black, right?
It's different, yeah, right.
Yeah, we are amateur physicists. Who's the greatest theologian of all time? You can't say Jesus. You can't say God.
I know. Well, so can I say a biblical figure? Because I might say Moses. Yep. I mean, St. Paul. You'd have to. I mean, probably St. Paul, right? You'd have to say Paul.
I'd probably pit John against him only because the early church gave him the moniker the theologian.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah.
What's the greatest word of all time?
Oh, I wish that I had time to think about this, because you could really come up with something clever. Greatest word of all time. What do you have? What would you say?
Ransom.
Why?
Well, C.S. Lewis liked it. and it's a biblical word. You could go with redemption. I think that would. You'd have to go with some kind of theological concept in our meta narrative.
Yeah, right. So I mean, you have to kind of lay aside the ones that are too low hanging of fruit, right? Justification, atonement. How about oh man, propitiation? How about that? Propitiation.
It's pretty good. Lots of syllables. Now we should get a professional Scrabble player to come on and answer the question, because they'd probably say chi, QI.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Most dynamic. Most useful in tight situations. Yeah.
Okay. Last one. Greatest novel of all time.
The Hobbit.
I was going to say Don Quixote, simply because it is the original novel. And I think there is something to this discussion of greatness about originality.
Yeah, that's fair. So I'm sure that you had this in mind, but let's just think for a second about the measure of greatness. It must be, especially if you think of the novel, it must be that it is the book that most fills up the definition of novel, right? The one that is most novelly of a novel, right?
Correct. Yes. So there's an ontological status. You cannot avoid talking about novels. If you did not have this novel, the history of novels would be changed.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Okay.
We should make a spreadsheet. So by the way, you've been making spreadsheets since you're 7. Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm. Thereabouts.
Yeah, 6 or 7, somewhere in that range. And you guys could subscribe to our LCMS Cloud Plus. So LCMS Plus is going to be a subscription service here soon, and you'll be able to watch just a whole bunch of Delta videos. I'm looking forward to it. And they're going to charge you for shipping, even though it's an online product. But LCMS Cloud Plus, that's where the real content's at. So you can name a cloud, and you get access to fun games like build church denomination.
Your own church polity, right?
Yeah. Your own church polity. And David's now going to create a spreadsheet for determining greatness.
So here's why that's actually a lot of fun, is because we have impulses about things. We have inclinations about things. I prefer this to that, or I think this is better than that. And you are not qualified to make those assertions until you have thought through why. And you haven't adequately thought through why until you have made a ton of comparisons, right? So I like this better than this because it is superior in this way. But let me look at other dimensions. And when you split things out by dimensions and you start to rate them, you discover, first of all, you better discover your intuitions, which I think is really, really helpful. Like to actually realize what it is that you think, and then also discover the weaknesses of your intuitions, right? So like, I think that this thing is superior because of this bias or prejudice that I have, which is very often the case, right?
Yeah. So I'm thinking about like wine tasting. How would
Mm.
you even begin to quantify that? But these guys, pronounce it for me, the wine experts. I want to hear.
Sommelier. Yeah.
That's very good. They can objectify it. It's crazy watching these guys. We watched a wine documentary on it, and they're like, "I taste freshly cut garden hose."
That reminds me of a bottle of scotch that said on the label, something like, toasted marshmallows and diesel smoke.
Honestly, I kind of like that. That sounds nice.
It does. It does sound nice. Give it to me in
I,
ice cream. I'll eat that.
there you go, diesel ice cream. Yeah, good. So this is the age-old debate about subjective and objective, and there's a crossroads that I think can be obtained.
Yeah, and I think that this is the examined life, right? Is recognizing your own subjectivity, which allows you to more closely approximate objectivity, because you have to budget for yourself, right? You have to do it all the time, and that's good. It's a wholesome thing to do.
Now, in a few minutes, we're going to get to this question: who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Which is the even more pertinent question. But we've got a listener question, which is the greatest question of this week. So the question goes like this: I was watching a Catholic podcast. Any comment?
No, I got nothing.
Okay. Was it Pints with Aquinas? Lured in by the title, do Protestants really worship God? So we could find this. The argument was made that while Protestants engage in prayer, preaching, and scripture reading, they leave out the sacrifice. Okay, that's the key term that is claimed. It has been a key element of worship from the beginning, is what the Catholics claim. For Catholics, the Eucharist is a sacrifice. Unless I have forgotten something from my confirmation classes long ago, this is not the Lutheran view. You are correct. And while having Holy Communion weekly is now common, that has not always been the case, and we always felt we were engaging in worship even without it. We did address this last week. So here's the question. From a Lutheran perspective, what makes worship worship?
Good. You got me thinking about, we just read Psalm 4 on Sunday in Bible class, right? Offer right sacrifices. So the Lord does desire sacrifice, and that is crucial in understanding worship. But Psalm 4, the latter half of that verse 5 says this, and put your trust in the Lord. Offer right sacrifices and put your trust in the Lord. So the explication of it comes in Psalm 51, where it says, the sacrifices of God are a broken spirit and a contrite heart, right? So sacrifice is a crucial part of worship. But the sacrifice that a sinner brings is the sacrifice of thanksgiving and praise, right? It's reception of the forgiveness of sins.
That's great. This is really the greatest sedes for the apology of the Augsburg Confession against ex opere operato, which means by the work itself. And so the thing there is, the Catholic definition of worship is just simply by going through the motions of the Mass, which has been prescribed. That is how you merit God's grace, which is what essentially the entire apology of the Augsburg Confession is against.
Yeah. So now I would really like to get a Roman Catholic on to answer that claim that you just made, because I find it hard to believe that anyone actually believes that. And that's because I'm a Lutheran, right? How could anybody read the scriptures and believe that by doing the work itself, you are meriting grace, given all that Jesus says about everything? So I have to believe there's more going on than meets the eye. And I'd love to hear a Roman Catholic apologist answer that claim.
Well, it's so frustrating though because they have clear language, and then you guys say you guys pray to saints, and they go, no, we don't. It's like, well, yes, you do. Just own it and advocate for it. Like that's.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it's fine. I think part of that has to do with what they actually view as happening during the worship service, because they view it as a real sacrifice. Now, what do they use the term bloodless sacrifice?
Mm-hmm.
But because it actually is a sacrifice, that there is merit in itself there.
Right. And so the hazard there is not, strictly speaking, the notion that the body and blood of Jesus is sacrificial, right? The question is twofold. One, when did the sacrifice take place, and who's offering it, right? Those two things are critical.
Good. So Melanchthon makes the helpful distinction in the Apology between sacrifice and sacrament, which, properly understood, both belong to worship. And by the way, I think going to the New Testament is helpful here too, because the Greek word for worship is literally just prostrate. So just means to offer, or to bow down, offer something to God. Namely what you said, prayer, praise, and thanksgiving. That's one side of it. But then what's your third favorite German word?
Gottesdienst.
Yeah. That's good. What does it mean? I think this is actually helpful.
It is. Well, yeah. So this is critical part of new member instruction for me. I don't usually use the word Gottesdienst because I don't want to project onto my learners my Germanisms, but it means the service of God, and it means that you've got two directions. So you draw two arrows on the whiteboard, one going up and one going down, one in which we serve God and one in which God serves us. The arrow in which God is serving us is a sacramental orientation, and the arrow going up in which we serve God is the sacrificial orientation. And like you said, both things are true of worship, of Christian worship. It's always, as with many things, a question of priority. Which one comes first? Which one's the greatest, you might say, even.
Ooh, that's nice. Now I've got my Lutheran service book out here, and if you have an LSB, I find this introduction on Roman numeral 8 and 9 to be helpful. And it's talking about service. And I'm looking for the word Gottesdienst in here, and I don't find it because it's not italicized, but it's certainly referenced. So there you go. You could go.
So I got a question for you.
English. Yeah.
Okay. So the word worship is not difficult for us. Like, what makes, from a Lutheran perspective, what makes worship worship? Well, it's really simple. It's preaching and the administration of the sacraments, to which we respond with prayer and praise. That's worship. That's Christian worship, you might say. When I talk to non-Lutheran Christians, especially of evangelical and non-denominational varieties, when they use the word worship, they seem to me primarily to mean the singing of praise songs. That's primarily what they mean. And that is interesting because it produces a confusion when we're talking about worship, right? There's this confusing thing going on.
So they've got one aspect of it. Would we say they've got half of it? They've got half of it, right?
Well, I wouldn't even feel like I needed to make a judgment about it. I would just say they're using the word in a different way than we are, right? They're defining the term differently. And that, I mean, whatever. You can define terms however you want, right?
I guess.
Didn't Humpty Dumpty say that?
Yeah, when I use a word, it means exactly what I mean it to mean.
Right.
That's right. Now I'm trying to get back to like a good biblical definition, because Jesus talks about worship quite a bit in John 4 with the Samaritan woman at the well. In fact, the word worship shows up in one form 10 times in verses 20 to 24. So a 10 times usage in 5 verses would be a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And there, this is some heavy hitting stuff, because you got to really tease out, what does this mean? So he says, worship the Father. Okay, so I think that's really key, is you got to be, true worship is worship of the true God, right? And then you got to know, he says, we worship what we know. Okay, so there you go. There's got to be something going on with the mind, as far as you're able, like with ages, because little children, they cry out, right? Jesus says the babes, um, they cry out to God as well.
Yeah, this is good. Let me just offer this the kind of like context. At the World Cup, in the World Cup halftime show, there was a crowd of people singing, "We believe in love. We believe in love." And I was thinking about how they are worshiping what they do not know, right? Because it's pretty nebulous what exactly love is. But anyways, go on.
No, that's good. Well, Paul would address that too, right? At Mars Hill. And this is what Jesus is doing. He's like, you guys are worshiping something, but let me tell you who the real God is. And then there's true worshipers. So Jesus makes that distinction as well, meaning there is false worship. And then what does it mean to worship in spirit and truth?
I mean, it must mean at the very least not with your lips, not lip service, right? Which is the Jesus target frequently in the Gospels.
And then you can here's a good one. You can make a good argument for the genus Maestaticum based on this, because wherever we worship on the planet, whether it be at Jerusalem or Samaria, there Jesus is right there. He's the truth. They're right among us.
Very good.
It's also, worship is bigger too. Would you, like Paul tells us to live our lives as living sacrifices. So would you say the entire Christian life, as in a wide view, is supposed to be one of worship?
Yeah. So, I mean, the English word is kind of handy here. I think I suspect that it's a good definition for proskuneo, but worship literally means to ascribe worth to, right? So you ascribe worth, you say God is worthy by, one, trusting his promises, right? Believing, taking him at his word. If you didn't think he was worthy, you wouldn't believe him. If you do think he's worthy, you do believe him through your thanksgiving and praise. So you speak, you proclaim his worthiness, right? And then in your life, you demonstrate his worthiness by obeying his word, right?
Yeah. Anything else about worship? Worthy is good. That's that's a good
which of course, I mean, there's so much you can do with that, right? Because it's like, what is worth it to you, right? Yeah, like what is worth your time and your attention? That's what you worship. So
good. I was just thinking about the names of our hymnals, if they're telling as well. So the Lutheran hymnal is straightforward. It tells you what it is. But then in 78 and 82, the hymnals both included the word worship. So Lutheran Book of Worship and then Lutheran Worship was the blue one. And then now we've got the Lutheran Service Book. So now that the worship committee has been reassembled, and I don't know when we're going to get a new hymnal. I hope not till I'm retired, because I'm finally getting comfortable with this one. And I don't want to change the page numbers in the hymns, but I'm just a stubborn old guy, so whatever. But what do you think they're going to call the new one?
The Lutheran Service Book and Hymnal of Lutheran Worship.
That would be the trend.
Whatever it is, it's going to have the worst acronym. You can be sure of that. That's going to pay off on Polymarket. I'll tell you what.
I'm trying to think of, like, Walala. Would that be the worst acronym? Worship of American Lutherans adoring
Liturgical
the Lord.
Worship. Yeah.
The Lord Adonai. Walala.
Yeah. There you go.
Perfect.
This is a special, by the way, a special consulting service that Josh Reber provides to anybody, all comers. You need an acronym, he will provide it. So,
I will. My standard fee is a $200 initial call fee, and then $500 an hour, which I think you will find fairly reasonable in this space of acronym suggesting. And if you say, why contact you when ChatGPT could do it for free? Yeah, but I've got a soul. So
that's right. Yeah. I said that in my sermon yesterday, talking about the value of human life. Artificial intelligence will never be life. So it does not have the same value. Don't forget it. Even when it lies to you.
That's good.
Okay. So we got to talk about Matthew 18. Yep. Who is greatest in the kingdom of heaven?
it does amaze me that he so in verse 4 he gives the question, right? Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, which must have really taken their breath away. And do you think they fought about this all the time? Because in Luke, they're fighting about this during the Lord's Supper.
Yeah, and in Mark, it's this great episode where they're walking on the way to Capernaum, and Jesus is like, "What were you talking about, guys?" I love it so much, and they didn't tell him because they were arguing, but they're like self-conscious about it. They know they shouldn't be arguing about it.
Now he's already he's already answered this in essence, right? Because he said John the Baptist is the greatest of those born among women, but then he says that whoever is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he is. What's going on with the paradoxical?
I think it simply has to be Jesus is what's the way to put this? Speaking in a he's using a circumlocution in order to describe the fact that greatness is not measurable by human standards, right? So the economy of God's kingdom subverts a worldly economy. And you can do that in any number of ways, right? So you can do that by bringing a child into your midst and saying, here's a great one. And you can do that by saying, look at how great John was. But even if you're the last person coming into the kingdom of heaven, you're greater than him, right? So what you're basically doing, what Jesus is doing is showing that your human way of thinking about things needs to be subverted generally.
So what is it about a child that is so admirable and great?
I think it's got to be at its heart their credulity, right? That children believe what they are told.
That's a childlike faith is definitely a phrase in the scripture, right? So what about curiosity?
Yeah, openness. Yeah, there is that's good. Which is connected to a kind of humility. It's an interesting kind of humility among children because I have often thought about how children are exemplary for us because they just say what they think. They're not ashamed of their thoughts. They just tell you. They don't lie. They try to lie, but they can't hide it as well as grown-ups can, right? So you actually can see what a kid is thinking, and that's good.
And then if they do lie, it's so obvious. And then you ask them if they lie, and then you see the smirk on their face.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Whereas you're being lied to all the time by grown-ups and you'll never know it because that's the main thing we practice as people is how to get away with lies.
Now, do we buy this in our society? I mean, American culture that children are the greatest.
It can't possibly be true, considering both the consumeristic view of children. That'd be what it is, right? They're accessories in our culture. They're fine accessories, but they don't have the same value as like your own life.
And then I find so if they manage to make it out of the womb, then we obsess over everything, and it seems like you're right, they're accessories. So you think about Sunday morning sports or doing all of this, and it's like, what level? Who's determining the greatness? Is it God, or are you trying to live vicariously through your child?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. By the way, speaking of making it out of the womb, I want to do a thorough study of this. But you know how we are so proud of ourselves for having extended the life expectancy of people in America? If you factor in all of the people who don't make it to the age of 1 because they don't make it out of the womb, life expectancy is much, much, much lower. And in fact, I suspect it's much closer to how it was 150 years ago.
What's the name of this guy? Brian, the biohacker. You know, is it Brian Johnson? Is that right? No, that's AC/DC.
The guy who looks like a vampire.
Right. Brian Bio. Yeah, I don't know. It is Brian Johnson, but it's it's Brian with a Y.
Oh yeah.
By the way,
there you go.
I mean, I know a lot of Brian. No, let's just settle this. Do you like Brian with a Y or Brian with an I?
Well, right now I want to be friends with Brian Stecker, so I like Brian with a Y.
Yeah, been there, done that. By the way, I'm a little bit peeved at him because I beat him in golf, and he's supposed to post this YouTube short saying I'm better at golf than him, and it's never happened. So, let's make it happen, buddy. And I'll replay you. Same bet. YouTube short. Let's go. So this is Brian Johnson, and I mean this is a very tragic story. So I don't want to make fun of him, but he's trying to cheat death, and he's done all this stuff, and then it turns out he's got this stomach lining disease, right? Like, isn't his stomach eating itself?
I've never heard that before, but
it just came out within the last couple of weeks. Now, the the funniest quote I saw was Ricky Bobby from Talladega Nights under it, and he goes, "No one lives forever, no one. But with advances in modern science and my high level of income, it's not crazy to think that I can live to be 245, maybe 300."
I mean, it is so hubristic. It's amazing. I mean, it must be a stunt. There's no way. I mean, maybe some people are crazy like that. I don't know, but that's incredible.
There's so many sermon illustrations, so it's like, man, you want to live forever? Guess what? Have you heard of this guy named Jesus Christ?
Right.
Anyways, yeah.
Okay. So we've got greatness in the kingdom of heaven, and Jesus. I think Jesus as subversive of human standards, right? So he's forcing us to ask the question, by what standard, right? Which is always a good question to ask.
Yeah, good. Now, speaking of greatness, this is a great threat, a great millstone. Verse 6. And this is a mulos, is it not? Millstone of a mule. So this is not one of those tiny little millstones you buy at Better Homes and Gardens. This is one that a donkey would have to walk around. And the picture is very drastic, but just put this idea of judgment before people's eyes. And that's what Jesus is doing here.
So Jesus he's entertaining all of these questions about degree, right? So what's the worst sin you can think of, right? And he's like, well, here, try this one on. Yeah.
Now there's a promise here though, which is incredible. Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me.
Yeah. Yeah. That is it's a beautiful thing, and this is where the Lutheran doctrine of vocation shines most glorious, right? Because the measure of, like, if you succumb to earthly human measures of greatness, you chase and chase and chase and chase and never attain, right? Because you're seeking glory, the glory that comes from man. Meanwhile, God has assigned to you your portion of glory, and it's right at home. You don't have to go looking for it, right? Because whoever how did he put it? Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me, which is exactly what every Christian parent does.
How does Chesterton put it? He's like, we're so busy trying to find the world outside the walls of our house that we fail to realize there's an entire world within them. Something like that.
Yeah. The most extraordinary thing in the world is an ordinary man and an ordinary woman and an ordinary child. So I think that's Chesterton also. Yeah.
It's good. You're getting me fired up. I'm excited to live life.
Let's do it.
Now, you want to do some hamartiology in verses 7 through 9. So we got this admonition back in the Sermon on the Mount, but there is an added part here. So in Matthew chapter 5, verse 29, Jesus talks about your right eye, throw it away, and then your right hand. And now he adds the foot in between them in verse 8 here of Matthew chapter 18.
Yeah. Why? What do you make of it?
Well, what I see is the progression, and the hand is what commits the sin itself. The foot brings you there, and then the eye is what lures you there. And so I think it's just really instructive at whatever stage you're at in temptation. like cut it off right there. And again, the story of David and Bathsheba is so helpful here because you see it starts with the eyes. He sees Bathsheba bathing. Okay, well, just cut it off right there. Stop looking, right? And then when you actually send your people over there on foot, you should call back the cavalry. And then when you have her over at the palace, stop it right there, send her back home.
What a beautiful way to frame God's gracious provision. For every temptation, he provides the way of escape. And in fact, if you're honest about it, he provides so many ways of escape. Like at every turn, he says, you could stop now. You could stop now. You could stop now, right? Because he hasn't killed you yet. You could stop now, right?
Right. So it's like, there's three opportunities here with the passions to cut it off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Huh. Yeah. It's necessary that temptations come. Why? Why is it necessary that temptations come?
Well, it does seem to be baked into God's creation. I mean, he does allow Satan to exist all the way back to Genesis chapter 3. So even if Adam and Eve didn't fall for the temptation still would have been there.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it is, is it because of, like Peter says, that the tested genuineness of your faith may be proven, right? It's necessary. Otherwise, faith isn't proven.
I think so. So it's just like any kind of product. You have to do testing on it to see if it's actually going to pan out, if it's as good as you say it is. And this is with anything. This is with gold and all sorts of metallurgy. It should be applied to submarines, but it's not always, as we've seen. And yeah, I think this is when you see if something's really worth its salt, is when it's actually squeezed.
Yeah, that's good. And so this is good. I mean, there's all kinds of proverbial wisdom to be gained here. Like we lead us not into temptation is a good prayer. God tempts no one. But what are we really praying there? Could we say that what we're praying is that God would prevent us from succumbing to temptation, that we would withstand temptation and stand in the evil day, right? That we would not be tempted, allured by temptations that exist, and in some sense, you could say like, it won't do for me just never to encounter temptation. I know that I must encounter it, that my faith would be put to the test.
Do you also think the temptation is the ultimate temptation of apostasy, that we wouldn't be led to that?
Sure. Yeah. The temptation to despair. To throw in the towel. Yeah.
Okay. Angelology. There's so many good, like, this is like systematically, there's a clear progression here in Matthew 18, but there's so many fun theological topics.
Yeah, where do you get angels?
Verse 10, for I tell you in heaven, their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. So it's couched in this language of children, verse 10, that you do not despise these little ones. So there's the logical progression. But I think there's quite a bit to talk about here. Extremely comforting that children have angels, and we agree that the angels protect us as well, but it seems like children have special protection.
Yeah. And they never lose touch with the Father who's in heaven. Their angels always see the face. Because I've often thought about what is it that angels actually, where is their strength? What do they accomplish? And it is through the conveyance of God's word, of the favor of God, right? Delivering the promises. So they are always seeing the Father's love for this little one. And so however they work, I mean, who knows, right? How angels work. They are conveying that, which you might even think about like in terms of temptation, right? So how is it that angels might protect you intact in the face of temptation? It's by presenting to you the ways of escape, right?
Now, is this the gospel reading for Michaelmas?
Yes, I think so.
Walther's sermon on St. Michael's Day is so good. And it is worth the purchase. I forget if it's volume 1 or volume 2, but he takes this verse here and says that their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. And he goes, guys, the angels are faster than anything. They're stronger than anything. They're more beautiful than anything. And yet their number one desire is to worship God. So that inspires us to worship all the more.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Love it.
Man, like CFW Walther, he was the greatest. If you want to say who's the greatest Lutheran theologian of all time after Luther, I'm saying Walther, and I know you Orthodox Lutheran guys are going to say Gerhard or Chemnitz, and that's fine. And Walther certainly cites them a lot, but for our American context, that boy's George Washington, Abe Lincoln, and LeBron James, and Michael Jordan, and Wayne Gretzky, and Babe Ruth thrown into one.
There you go. You get to do that. I mean, this is the privilege of we're not handing out consolation prizes, but we are saying that you've got a domain, and Walter, in your domain, you are the best. We love you.
Ooh, so there's this New Yorker article now out. I should have brought this up at the beginning, but it's about what's it called? It's the Olympics where PEDs, performance enhancing drugs, are allowed. And that's another part of the discussion, because Lance Armstrong, greatest bicycle rider of all time, not anymore.
Yeah, right. Huh. Okay. Excellent. Now, so you want to talk about being unforgiving?
Yeah, the steps. So the steps of admonition then lead into the parable of the unforgiving servant. And do you think this is one of the most cited Bible chapters in our circles?
I suppose so, right? Have you the invocation of Matthew 18 as the protection against the breach of the 8th commandment, right? So go to your brother privately if he sins against you. Yeah, I suppose so. Which is ironic because I think that, as well known and as oft cited as it is, it's actually probably so little used in its appropriate context, right? It's misapplied more than actually properly applied.
I think so too. What troubles me is, why are we always in conflict?
Yeah, good. So somebody asked about in Psalm 4 on Sunday, be angry and do not sin. You know, what's up with that? And I asked the question, like, well, why would anger be connected with sin? And they got it right. They said, because we tend to be angry about the wrong things. And that's exactly the problem here, right? So you don't get to handle Matthew 18 unless you are have your mindset on the things of God and not on the things of man, you know?
And the whole chapter is about reconciliation. Like, that's the point. So you're going to win your brother over. And Jesus he says, like, hey, if you go to him one-on-one, then you've gained your brother, and it stops there. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
we look forward to just doing procedure so we can get to the second and third steps.
Yeah. And so this is so good, because I think that part of the problem there is that we don't believe it. Like, we don't believe that reconciliation is actually possible. And I think part of the reason for that is because we see it so seldom. I mean, it actually is rare. It's rare for somebody to confess and repent and be forgiven. I think that is a very rare occurrence, probably in part because we don't train it in the locus where it matters most, in the home, you might say. Like, we don't actually practice reconciliation among Christians. And so it's a very rare thing. Instead, what we tend to see is kind of a stasis where there is, like sin bubbling beneath the surface, and then sin emerges. And by the time it emerges and is being dealt with, quote unquote, according to Matthew 18, hardness of heart is already like in full force, because there's been no reconciliation practiced prior to that. And so our experience is, if you confront your brother with his sin, he's going to tell you off and go away, and then you're done, right?
There's a question of standing here as well. Now there is a textual variant, and so this would be fun to debate. This is where it actually could matter. But the words "against you," from what I understand, I don't have my textual apparatus handy here.
So it
But
could just be if your brother sins.
right, yeah. So I think that is an important thing to delineate, and Luther does this with the Eighth Commandment.
Yeah.
Right? He's like, if you don't have any standing here, just keep your mouth shut. But so that's really good advice. Wisdom really calls out, though, we're really bad at talking when we're not supposed to talk, and then not saying something when we should say something.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I suspect that part of that is because we recognize the stakes. So we're glad to talk when we shouldn't, when we have already rendered a judgment about somebody, and so we're not kind of not concerned about the outcome. But we are hesitant to talk when the stakes are high because we are afraid of the possibility of judgment. Which to me is the reason why these verses are not applied when they should be. It's because we recognize the gravity of the situation. If you confront your brother with his actual sin, and it's actually sinful, and he refuses to hear you, it's getting real fast.
Would you mind? Having walked through the steps of excommunication, were you mindful of going through these steps?
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging because you think about them kind of procedurally, and I don't think that's what Jesus. That's the tendency, is to think about them procedurally and in alignment with, say, what your Constitution says about discipline, right? But I think that most of the cases in which we would have to use excommunication, it's not a private matter. And so Matthew 18 doesn't actually apply. And this is Lutheran on the Eighth Commandment. It's like when it's a notorious sin, you're not protecting anybody's reputation, right? Instead, you're just looking at the facts with the desire of restoration, but the facts are apparent,
I was talking to somebody last week about this very thing. It was about interchurch relations, actually, and tell me what you think about this. So we've got the Bible, we've got the confessions, but also when it deals with dealing with one another, if we could just adhere to the bro code, we'd be so much better off.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have each other's back. Have some loyalty. Come on. I was thinking about this with talking to my kids about virtues, and loyalty was one of the first ones that came to mind. I'm like, I want to teach them to be loyal. That would be a really valuable thing. Be a bro, man. Come on.
Yeah. So if one church says you can't be a pastor in this church body, in your sister church, you don't go and say, okay, you can be a pastor in our church body. That's the bro code,
Yeah. Yeah. Or if one pastor says, hey, you can't take communion at this altar, a pastor in the same church body should probably say, hey, let's get that sorted out first, because that's the bro code.
Yep, exactly. Cool. Let's do you want to write should we codify that? There's probably lots of terrible bro codes out there, so we need a distinctly Lutheran bro code.
Yeah, let's work on it. I'll tell you who doesn't know the bro code. Robert Farrer Capon, who I stopped reading. I mean, so great, really nice literary insights. It's fun reading Robert Farrer Capon. But there are reasons not to read him. And one among many, is that when he reads Matthew 18, he says that Jesus is being tongue-in-cheek when he says, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. After all, Jesus dined with the Gentiles and the tax collectors. So Jesus is doing is teaching you that you're never casting people out of your presence. Just such hogwash.
Man, you should really... what you need to do with outlandish claims like that is just push it to its extreme and see how that plays out. Because then you can never say anything about anything, which I think is the point.
That's exactly. I mean, self-justification is operative there for a guy like Capon.
Yeah, go read his biography, and you'll see exactly what we're talking about. It's such a shame because he writes so elegantly, and from my understanding, he's got some good cookbooks too. But you're right; it was assigned reading when I was in college, and you're just enamored with it. But then you realize this is just violating the plain meaning of the Bible.
Yes. Yep. That's right.
So what do you say in the parable of the unforgiving servants, that the unforgiving servant, that Jesus is just speaking in jest here too? Well, so I've heard this one before in a Lutheran pulpit, and this is a homiletical sin to say you're forgiven for not forgiving.
So work this out. Okay, work it out right now, because it does seem like this. All sins will be forgiven the sons of men, right? But one sin will not be forgiven. Blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. And what could be more blasphemous than having your sins forgiven but refusing to forgive somebody else, right?
Yeah, the two are connected, because what you're saying is that Jesus didn't die for you, and if you're saying that kind of statement, then you're saying he didn't die for me either.
Right. Or it's a refusal to yes, exactly, right. Jesus didn't die for you, and I'm in the same boat as you, and so I'm refusing myself forgiveness in that way. Yeah, exactly. Now, I was thinking about it in terms of understanding your own the depths of your own sin, right? So like your sins are not nearly so my sins are not nearly so grievous as yours. Which if that's how you're looking at the nature of Christ's forgiveness, that it was like, you didn't have so much that needed to be forgiven, and that's why his forgiveness applies to you. But this other person, it's too much for him to forgive that person. You've missed the gospel entirely.
This is why it's so helpful to have these steps of admonition and then this parable side by side, because it does teach us about different kinds of forgiveness. And what I mean by that, there's corporate forgiveness, and then what would you like? So Jesus describes it as forgiveness in your heart in verse 35. Yeah. And so there really does seem to be a distinction between holding grudges, but then also being wise. So if the church is going to discipline somebody, it doesn't mean they're not obeying this. They're simply doing what Jesus has commanded us to do. But when you do discipline somebody, we don't hate them. Like, we don't hold a grudge against them. And I think that's a really key distinction.
Right. The withholding of forgiveness in that case is in order that it might be applied to the repentant sinner. And so the exercise for me, people struggle with understanding what is meant by forgiveness, and right, they get themselves into a bind when they think to themselves, am I like this wicked servant because I still think about that thing that was done to me, or because I still think, I still have bitter thoughts about this person? And the simple exercise is fair, but imagine if that person were to repent, if they were to say, I'm sorry for what I did. Would you continue to punish them? Would you throw them out? No, because if you're a Christian, that's exactly what you're seeking for, is like that they would repent and that you'd be restored. Now you might be so hard pressed to conceive of them repenting, but that's not the same thing as not forgiving them, right?
Right. Yep. And there are really hard practical things you have to suss out here. Like, what does it practically look like to forgive? Does it mean I'm going to open myself up to abuse over and over and over again? Right. No, that's not what it means. Like, there are certain circumstances when you can cut off contact from certain people and you're not sinning, but you don't hate them.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to see this person burning in hell? Of course not. Right. That's not what you want to see.
Right. Yep, exactly. Now these numbers are. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I
was like, these numbers are always so much fun. So the parable starts off with, I do not say to you 7 times, but 70 times 7. Now there's some ambiguity in the Greek, whether it's 77 or 7 times 70. Can you count to 490? That's my first question.
No. Mm-mm. Just because I get bored. That's all.
Not without an Excel spreadsheet, right?
That's right.
By tens, maybe by 5s. I don't know. Like, that's a lot of digits. But these numbers have a lot of import, and we talked about this over a year ago, right? It's Genesis chapter 5 with Lamech talking about the 77. What was it for?
Vengeance on the one who 77-fold.
Yeah, Genesis 4, verse 24. Yeah, Lamech says he's going to have 77-fold types of vengeance. And so Jesus is reversing that here. And then also Daniel's, if you take it as 70 times 7, that seems to be the completion of time, right? The 70 weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
And then 10,000 talents. Did you do the calculation for US dollar?
Long ago I did. Right? We're talking billions and billions of dollars, right?
So it depends. It depends if you use what measurement you're actually using. But if you're going with the typical Roman talent as a weight, and then you're using the today's troy ounce of gold value, this would be $44 billion.
Don't worry, I'll pay it off. I got it.
Doesn't that tells you everything, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. So what's remarkable is that he's forgiven the debt, even though he's coming at it with that attitude, right? Like he clearly doesn't appreciate the depths of his debt, and still he's forgiven. That's interesting, right?
Right. Yeah. There's something to be said about objective justification. Now, he's not going to actually receive it, so he's not going to receive the forgiveness. But you got to see the vicarious atonement in here. Tonstoffel, right? There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Somebody's footing the bill, and it's God. He's paying for it, and this guy thinks he can pay him back. Now, if you're going to allegorize this as in assign particular things to each thing in the parable, what would you say a talent is? Like, what's our debt to God?
It is, you could say it is, the debt is rectifying the injustices, the unrighteousnesses that we have, wrought in the world, right?
Sure. Do you think when we sin, we quote unquote rob God of his glory?
That seems to be a thing we couldn't do. We couldn't rob God of his glory.
So we think we can, right? Like when we don't glorify God, that is something we can do. So we don't add to God's glory. Now this is what they call the bucket problem, because God is infinitely glorious, and yet somehow he becomes even more glorious. But we try to take that glory away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now we're forgiven. Well, praise God. 100 denarii. Now, it's been a while since I've done this calculation, but I've always gone with silver, and it's a few $1,000.
Yeah. Yep. Which is not nothing. It's not nothing, but in comparison, it's nothing.
This is just so visceral. He chokes him.
Yeah. The image I usually I try to draw. I still have to work on. You ever have this where like you use an image or you use an illustration again and again and again, and you're trying to get it right? This is the illustration that I've got. It's like we're each of us an iceberg, and the iceberg is our sin. And I know how far beneath the surface my own sin extends. But when I look around me, the only thing that I see is the bit of the iceberg that is above the water in everybody else. And so if I'm going to do just a straight up comparison, my sins are always greater than everybody else's sins. Always. Because I can't possibly see.
I think you just described Freud's id, ego, and superego.
Oh, that's probably true. Yeah.
But I think there is value in that of what you just described. That is, Freud was a pervert, but he was right about some stuff.
Okay. Hey, I gotta go in a minute. What's grinding your gears?
Oh, good. So I read David Scare's new book on the resurrection narratives, and that's a lot of fun. So if you've never read David Scare, highly recommend it. It takes a lot of the confusion out of when he talks, and I love listening to him lecture and talk. It's a blast. But if you've never experienced it before, you're going to be totally lost, because it's inside baseball within inside baseball, essentially, is what it is. So Access is writing, and this book is very valuable because he is taking an absurd position. So he's willing to grant premises which he doesn't think are true, such as the Q document. And he says, okay, if we're going to take this for what it is, here are the implication. And so he completely obliterates the argument from the inside. And so he's like, so let's say Mark's the first gospel. Here's what this would actually mean if it was, which it's not. And so it's a fun book in that regards. Pretty quick, 150 pages. You can get through it in a couple days. And then I read through the Chuck Klosterman football book, and now I just started today, and this might be pertinent next week in Matthew 19, whenever we talk. This is Divorce and Remarriage by my professor, Benjamin T.G. Mays.
I was going to ask you how you got that, because I put in an order on Amazon and it says I'm getting it in January, and that doesn't seem fair.
So I ordered it directly from CPH, which,
Oh.
I'm usually against.
See, I assumed that you would never, but I guess you did. So.
But the discount for being a professional, so they sent it out. I got it on Saturday.
Okay. Well, I'm going to order it. I'd love to talk about it.
Yeah, it's he's a really good scholar, and having all the historical data there, very helpful. So I'm about 50 pages in, and I'm looking forward to reading the rest of it. What's grinding your gears?
Well, I'm continuing to read The Talented Mr. Ripley, and I told you last time that he's an American Raskolnikov, and I didn't realize how much of an American Raskolnikov he actually is, because he ends up killing somebody in the story. I didn't know that he did, but 90 pages in, he kills somebody, and then he's going to try to take this man's life, become this person, and he is psychotic, and it's so dark. And there's on the cover, the word claustrophobic is used, and I think that's fitting to describe this book, but also my sense about American literature generally. I do not like it generally because it feels claustrophobic to me, and I know that I'm supposed to still get something from it, but it man makes me want to listen to some. I've been listening to some bluegrass gospel music. And it makes me want to listen to some bluegrass gospel music, which is simple and harmonious. And also, even though it's full of suspect theology, I'm still okay with it. So
hit me with a track.
Have you been washed in the blood of the Lamb, Josh? I mean, I think that we would do well to ask that question of ourselves more often. Have you been washed in the blood of the Lamb?
Revelation 7.
Yeah. I mean, even if it's always answered in the affirmative, which it should be if you're, a Christian, baptized, forgiven, but it's probably okay to ask it. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, there's value in the spirituals. Were you there when they crucified my Lord?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Requires some philosophical engagement. Okay, good. Yeah. Well, you should read some Mark Twain after this, so you're not so down on American literature.
Okay, I'll do that. All right, I'm going to hit stop.
3, 2,